Matt Lewis.
Matt Lewis.
Matt Lewis.
Matt Lewis.
Matt Lewis with the Daily Beast. He's their senior columnist.
Friend of mine and friend of America.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It's Friday, the Friday after the election. It's a beautiful day here outside your nation's capital in beautiful West Virginia. Thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast. 5 stars, please. And thank you for supporting our work on Patreon. It is because of you that we get to have these long-form conversations. So hook us up at patreon.com/Matt Lewis. We have a great return guest today, back by popular demand, the great Katie Herzog, who is the co-host of the Blocked and Reported podcast. Katie, welcome back to the news.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Great to talk with you. How are you holding up here post-election?
I am better than I was a couple days ago. I have slept. I have eaten. I might exercise today. I've taken a walk. So I feel like I'm getting back into humanity. I have crawled out from my dark cave of depression and anxiety, and I'm coming back.
So, are you serious? Were you really experiencing anxiety?
I definitely was feeling some anxiety the night of the election. I woke up a couple times during the night and immediately checked my phone, which of course is exactly what you should be doing when you can't sleep. It's great for insomnia. You want all that blue light, So I was definitely feeling anxious, depressed. I was feeling a little bit depressed. I thought that Trump was going to eke out a victory. I didn't want that to happen.
Were you supporting Biden?
Yeah, I voted for him. I mean, he wasn't I don't love the guy, but I voted for him. And not, that was mostly I voted against Trump. And my vote doesn't really matter. I live in Washington State. So I was not like crying about it or anything like that. I did cry. I will admit I did cry when Trump won in 2016. But I was not and I went out to protest and I did the whole thing and, thought that he was going to usher fascism into the United States. That did not happen. I think much to the chagrin of some of my fellow lefties who seem to have almost wanted that to happen so they could have something to complain about. So I was not that far gone with my Trump derangement syndrome, but I certainly feel better now that it looks like Biden is going to eke out a victory.
There definitely was, I don't know about Trump derangement syndrome, but Trump PTSD. And I can tell you, on election night this Tuesday, there was, after Florida went to Trump, there was an hour or two where I had that same feeling that I had in 2016, and it was the feeling everything we think we know is wrong.
Yep, it's destabilizing.
Yeah, scary.
And you would think that, sorry to interrupt you, but you would think that after 2016, those of us in the media especially would realize that this is a possibility. And I think that I did. I was not as optimistic about the blighted, the blue wave as I think a lot, my co-host Jesse Singal and a lot of my friends and family, they were convinced that this was, Dems were going to take the Senate, they're going to take the House, they're going to take the White House. There was going to be a blue wave. I wasn't that optimistic about it because we've seen that polling is really flawed. We saw this 4 years ago was not that long. And so I wasn't as shocked this time when it looked like, things might be going the other way.
But I have interviews all the time where I talk to, experts and smart people, and a lot of my conversations kind of went something like this. It went but last time they fooled us, and the so-called experts in the polls were wrong last time. Could that happen again? Oh, no, that couldn't happen again because, there are reputations on the line. The polling industry is sunk if they mess it up again. So trust me, they're doing a better job of weighting non-college educated whites, and then they're doing a better job of whatever it is. And here we go again. And after 4 years of polls and blue check marks telling me to get in line, you start to think, well, I guess they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, I certainly felt myself a little bit lulled by their optimism. And I don't, I think I learned a lesson here, which is my gut might actually be a better prognosticator than some of our
Katie,
pollsters.
You just nailed it. I literally, if you had just taken my gut, if you said okay, Matt, just go to 270towin.com and fill out what you think is going to happen. Honestly, I would have done better than the pollsters, and I would have done even better had I not been paying. Like, the less attention I had been paying, the better I would have done.
Right. And yeah, I don't think that there is going to be any sort of, I don't know, reckoning about this. I don't think there'll be a lot of introspection, and I don't want to just blame the pollsters. Like, they have an incredibly difficult job to do. The technology has changed such that you can't just call somebody's landline and expect them to answer and to give you an honest opinion. Most people don't answer the phone when you call, right? So there's a problem there.
Yeah. And the people who do answer the phone,
they're lonely.
They're not representative of the average person, right?
They're not.
And there are laws about calling cell phones, and then there's problems with like online polls, so yeah.
Right. So, but the media, I think, extrapolated from the polls that we did have so that you would see headlines, more in opinion pieces than in legitimately good reporting about, this coming blue wave, as though it was a foregone conclusion. It looks like it's 2016 all over again. And yet I don't think there's going to be any sort of reclamation for that. I don't think there's going to be any introspection. I mean, just in the last couple of days, reading the New York Times, listening to NPR, there's one narrative here among many of the pundits of the most respected pundits in America, and this is because of racism. That's it. And they're not paying attention to the fact that it appears as though, and of course, like, exit polls are even more problematic than polls themselves, because especially this year, because of vote by mail. So it's really too early to sort of speculate, but it does appear, especially in Florida and this Texas border country, or Arizona border country, that Trump is doing better with minority voters. Yeah. And
obviously this is a false consciousness. They do not realize that they are actually empowering white supremacy.
Right. There was a headline in the New York Times, something about, by Charles Blow. It was something about, exit polls show the power of the white patriarchy, or something like that. There are 150 million voters in this country. There are 150 million different reasons to vote for any particular different candidate, but these pundits are just lumping everybody into this one category, no matter their actual views, no matter their sexuality, their race, their gender, their sex, or whatever. It's just this assumption: if you vote for Donald Trump, you are a racist, you are a sexist. Fucking, excuse me for cursing there, but like, he's an incumbent. He's a celebrity. Some people agree with his policies. There are lots of reasons to vote for them. I don't agree with them, but there are lots of reasons. And you cannot just assume that there's one monocausal reason for anything in the world.
I totally agree. And I think that failing to reckon with that probably just means you keep repeating the same mistakes if you're a media elite, if you are a pollster. But I do want to drill down on this question a little bit, which is this. So Donald Trump barely won the presidency last time, right? He won 3 states by like 77,000 votes. Like, since then, he didn't do anything really to do outreach and try to persuade new people, like, save for maybe some outreach he did to Cuban Americans in South Florida. But basically, all he did was fan service. He doubled down on his own base. He, allegedly called, military heroes like losers and suckers. He attacked he said things about suburban women. Really didn't do a whole lot to attract people. The COVID crisis happens. He really botches it and mishandles it. And yet, has a pretty scary showing, like almost wins I mean, he's probably not gonna, it's probably gonna, I'm guessing at this point, as we're taping this on Friday, Biden probably gets like 306 electoral votes. So it might not look that close, but it was pretty close.
Yeah.
How is that possible? Why do people vote for Donald Trump?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. And this is one of the problems with our system as we know it, is that we lump people into these voting blocks. Like right now, it's like everybody has realized, like, Latinos are not a monolith. Okay, well, nobody's a monolith. We are individuals. And so there are lots of reasons to vote for Donald Trump. I mean, like, my neighbor voted for Donald Trump because he likes The Apprentice. I think that's a terrible reason.
This is your best friend, right?
My best friend, he's an 86-year-old Trump supporter. Yeah. And he also likes guns too. But when I asked him, like, who is your favorite president? His favorite president was John Kennedy. Why did he like John Kennedy? Because he was a Navy man, right? A lot of this stuff it's not about policy. It's not rational.
Aaron's grandparents or a granddad, I asked him, like, who's the best president of your lifetime? He's like 100. He's literally 97 or 98. Who's the best president of your lifetime? FDR. Who's the worst president of your lifetime? Barack Obama. You know what I mean? It's like, well, wait a second.
Right.
How is that possible?
Right. Well, I mean, maybe in his case, it really does have something to do with skin color. You don't know, right? I mean, there are lots of reasons that people vote for the way they do. For one thing, Donald Trump is an incumbent. He's also a celebrity. We live in a low information country. We live in a country that worships celebrity. This is speculation, but I do think that Democrats have failed to reach particularly the working class. And when you say the term working class right now, there's this assumption from a lot of people that what you mean is the white working class. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the working class, and the working class is a broad, not a coalition. It's a broad group of people across races, across sexes, across incomes. But let's say non-college educated people who work with their hands primarily.
All right. So I don't think my grandfather-in-law is a racist.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think your point is valid. So it's an interesting thing, right? Henry Olsen, who's a friend of mine who's been on this podcast a lot, he wrote a book called Working Class Republican about Reagan being more populist than a lot of people want to remember. And Henry's argument is that the future of the Republican Party is to become populist, but that doesn't just mean white people. He thinks that they're going to have like working class blacks or African Americans and Hispanics or Latinx. If whatever
we don't. They don't want us to call them that. Nobody wants. NPR wants us to call them that.
Only white progressives call them that. But whatever the case, that's what Henry wants. But here's the interesting question: Did these folks vote for Trump? And by this I mean African American men who voted for Trump and Latinx men who voted for Trump.
Oh my God, Matt! You can't say it. It's so bad. It's like makes me cringe every time I hear that fucking word.
Latino men.
Latino.
Did they vote for Trump? Did they vote for Trump because of the machismo? Because of the Trump? Like, in other words, did they specifically vote for Trump because he's Trump? Like, in other words, could Tom Cotton, could Josh Hawley become a populist who would attract their votes? Or do you have to be Trump to get that vote?
I suspect that you have to be Trump. That's what, I mean, I think that the rules don't apply to Trump. He exists in Barack Obama was perhaps a once in a generation or a once in a lifetime politician in terms of his ability to cross ideological lines. And Trump might also fall into that category. I think that the fact that he's a celebrity has a huge part to do with it. America loves celebrities, and also people think that he's rich. I don't think he's as rich as people think, but there's this idea that he's a successful businessman. And voting isn't always rational, right? So you can say like, okay, he has these policies that are going to be worse for working class people. He might promise that he's going to bring jobs back to America, but clearly he's been totally unable to do that. But he has these policies that, probably aren't going to actually be good for like the little guy for the most part. But it doesn't matter because we don't always vote based on policy. In fact, I think lots of people rarely vote on policy. Yeah. It's about party affiliation. It's about personality. It's about, honestly, I think the fuck you vote was a huge factor. I got an email from a guy who told me he voted for Trump. He was one of the actual undecideds, didn't decide who he was going to vote for until he got into the voting booth. And the reason he told me that he voted for Donald Trump was because of the way the media handled the Hunter Biden laptop story. It's not that he believes that Joe Biden was involved in some sort of corruption. For him, it was just it was an FU to the media and to what he sees as the liberal establishment, because he doesn't separate the media and from the Democrats. Right? He sees them as one entity, and I think that was true for probably a lot of people.
Yeah, I think there's truth in that. It's a problem for the Henry Olsen theory, which is that you could create a brand or an ideology that sort of gets rid of the bad racist parts of Trump,
right?
But kind of keeps the populist working class appeal, because it means that it doesn't work without Trump. And so therefore, what does the Republican Party do going forward? Let me ask you this. Let's say that you were running a major media company. Mm-hmm. And you had already fired all those millennials who were trying to tell you what to do. So you actually had control theoretically of this. What would your message be to your employees? Like you're saying, like, look, we've blown it so many times, we've gotten so many things wrong. Half the country hates us, half the country doesn't trust us. What would you do different?
Well, I think first of all, firing half the staff would be the first step. I think there's a real, journalism used to be reporting, right? It used to be a trade. It used to be a working man's job, and now it isn't. It's pundits, it's opinion writers, it's bloggers, it's elites, it's people like us who are not actually in touch with working people, and I think that's a huge problem. So what I would do is I would fire all the Columbia Journalism School grads, and I would hire a bunch of beat reporters from, like 40-year-old beat reporters from nowhere, Nebraska, and try to actually understand the middle of the country, not just the white middle of the country. I would also, hire a more diverse group of people, but not diverse because you're like a Black Smith grad whose family came from Nigeria.
Yeah.
I would hire poor people and working class people and people who don't have the sort of disconnect from the American public, because what we've seen from the national media again and again, we saw this in 2016, we're seeing it right now, is that the media does not understand America. It doesn't understand voters. And we are trying to control the conversation and doing a terrible job of it. And I think that's true of the Democrats as well. Joe Biden is not an anarchist. He's not a Marxist. He's a moderate, and he is not the person who most of the media wanted to be in office. Like the liberal elitist mainstream media were for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, right? The people chose Joe Biden. There's a disconnect right there in the first place. But conservative media was able to spin Biden as some sort of like anti-cop Marxist in a lot of cases, which isn't true. It's effective because you have these, like, you turn on the news and you see rioting and looting across American cities. That's not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Joe Biden's fault at all. And most of these people doing it are not Democrats. They are or they're like dumb kids, or they're like anarchists who don't want to vote in the first place. Their ideology does not lie with their allegiance does not lie with the Democratic Party. It lies with tearing down the whole system. But I think there's this assumption that that's the left. That's not the left. It's really not. It's not the establishment. The Democratic Party is really pretty centrist, moderate. It's conservative in a lot of ways. So I would do that. I also if I were, if I were running a media company, or if I were a Democratic strategist, I would get out of the culture war business and get back into like bread and butter issues. Andrew Yang was talking about this on CNN. And then people, of course, he said that, when he was running for office during the primary, he would talk to working class people and they would sort of visibly bristle when he said he was running as a Democrat. Mm-hmm. And he said, the Dems need to get out of these sort of boutique elitist issues, culture war issues about people's pronouns or whatever, and just get back to the things that actually affect people's lives. And the response to that among, many of like the blue check marks on Twitter was to call him a racist. But he's actually like has tapped into something here, just like, get out of the culture war business. Make this about the economy. Make it about taxes. Make it about jobs and infrastructure and healthcare and things that actually impact us on a daily basis, and not the things that we fight about on Twitter every day.
Yeah, man. I think so many people are just tuning out the media.
Totally.
And I think also there's a danger Democrats misread the quote unquote mandate, right? I mean,
yes, it's not a mandate.
Yeah, they voted for Biden because he's not Donald Trump.
Right.
And that's a good enough reason for a lot of people.
Right. I think there's going to be a real power struggle within the party between the progressive wing and centrist over the next few years. And that's,
and that's what that was my concern. It wasn't that Joe Biden was some sort of a Marxist, but it was that Biden's an old guy and I know he has some, centrist folks, DLC types around him, but the energy is on the left and the AOC wing. And the question I had, and then, even Kamala Harris. And then the question was, like, can Biden, hold them off and for how long?
I'm worried about that as well. This is something that my co-host and I argue about all the time. He thinks that my my concern is a little catastrophizing, but I'm concerned about it as well. You know, it'll be really interesting to see who he appoints to his cabinet, and I hope Biden really, if he's going to pander, he panders to the voters and not the media class. Because if he or his, you know, if Biden is not like hyper online, the dude's not on Twitter, he probably doesn't know his password. But if the people who are advising him are the same people who are advising like Elizabeth Warren, it's just going to be a disaster, right? Like those people are not tapped into what Americans actually like. They are catering to a hyper educated New York, you know, coastal elitist bubble, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all.
But props to Biden for this long, he's been able to like avoid the temptation of placating and pandering to woke Twitter, and it seems like it got him elected president. So
Yeah.
So good for him. You mentioned Jesse. I just have to say, if some tragedy should befall him, I mean, how's our chemistry? You and
Pretty
I.
good, pretty good. But I think I could have you as a co-host. But what I've realized is that what I need to make like a lot of money on the Patreon, I need a hot woman. So is Erin available?
I think Erin might have a crush on you, so I'm
Perfect.
gonna say no. She's not available. She's busy.
We can make so much money.
My wife is hot. I will cop to that.
She is.
So we know what Dems in the media have to do, and they probably won't. What do you think? What do you think Donald Trump will do?
God, what I want him to do is just retire to his golf course and we never hear from him again. I think he'll probably start a podcast, as everyone does. I hope he doesn't run in 2024. I think that would be ridiculous. He will be old as shit by that point. Of course, Biden will be older. But he needs the attention. So he'll either like call into Hannity every day, or maybe start a media company of his own.
Yeah. I wonder at what point it turns. Like right now, there's a certain segment of the population who kind of views Donald Trump as cool and like revolutionary and edgy. Like, when he hits 80, like at what age does this get old with these people?
Right. That's the question. I mean, I think Republicans really need him. There's no way that I think that Hillary would have won if Republicans had run, someone like low, like low energy Jeb or whatever Trump called him. Although everybody, like a lot of people hated Hillary Clinton, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, I think that the GOP needs him, to get people to come out and vote. And what are they going to do without him? Maybe replace him with Tucker Carlson. I don't know.
It's actually not a bad idea.
I think Tucker would do really well.
He may be, I worked for Tucker for 6 years. I mean, of all the people, Tucker Carlson may be the best man for the job.
It's interesting because he does, like, he's the heir to the Swanson's, like, chicken farm family or whatever, right? Like, the guy is a, like, born, like, silver spoon elitist, as is Trump. But like Trump, he does have this ability to sort of speak to people in a way that resonates, that makes you, I guess, forget the fact that he is not in the same class as you.
Yeah, he's, first of all, even though Tucker in a way comes from privilege, like his dad, I think was like some sort of like an orphan who was like and Tucker's mom, kind of like abandoned the kids at some point.
Really?
And yeah.
Wow.
You should listen to the interview Tucker gave to Adam Carolla a couple years ago.
Okay.
It's pretty eye-opening. So just like everybody, there are people that we think have it made and they've had this like charmed life, and they kind of have their own cross to bear. But Tucker is just like he's just smarter than Donald Trump, and he's someone who has. I mean, people forget this, but at like 10 years ago, when I went to work for Tucker Carlson, he was mocked by Rush Limbaugh, Chatworth Osborne, I think was the name he was assigned, and he was seen as a rhino, and he got booed at CPAC. So, and Tucker Carlson is someone who's been fired from MSNBC, and I think he, he's been like he was at CNN. He's been on TV for a long time. He's had adversity. He started his own company, The Daily Caller, along with Neil Patel, but he went from being like on Saturday mornings on Fox and Friends to being like the most popular TV host in America right now, at least on cable news. I think he could do it.
I think he could too, which is why I hope that he doesn't.
who do you like? Biden is going to basically fill in the gap now while this constitutional crisis or whatever we want to call it the last 4 years. Biden is our safety right now. I think he's going to get America through this. And I would say this may be the best scenario for someone like me who's a never Trump conservative, right? We got Joe Biden, so we got rid of Trump, but we don't have Biden with the left. We've got
Right.
Biden probably with a Republican
Mm-hmm.
Senate. Biden now is going to have to maybe compromise with Mitch McConnell. He's
I
going to
mean,
probably
nothing's going to happen for the next 4 years. It's going to be a repeat of the last 4 years of the Obama administration, or last 2 years.
I
Of the
don't think
Obama.
it's that bad though, because I think Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden have a much better chance of negotiating on some things
Mm-hmm.
than Barack Obama. But even if there's gridlock, who do you actually like? Is there somebody on the left? Is it Andrew Yang? I mean, to
It's
the
Andrew
degree he's on
Yang.
the left.
Yeah, it's Andrew Yang, and part of that is his personality. He seems like a decent guy. I mean, the idea of him running for president, I think, is a little ridiculous, because I don't like people with no governing experience stepping into that role. I think you need to like do your time in the trenches a little bit and like learn how politics work a little bit better. But I do like Yang. I think he's on the right side of history when it comes to this culture war stuff, and he understands that culture war is where Democrats are losing.
Yeah.
And he also understands technology, and that, no, very few politicians actually understand, I think, what's coming for the economy, because they just don't exist in that world.
Maybe
And
he
not,
needs to run for governor of New York, mayor of New York, something.
yeah,
Where's he based? California, New York? Where
he's
is
in New
he?
York, yeah. And I
He's
think
in New
there's
York.
been speculation that he would run for mayor. I'd like to see him in the Trump administration, or I'm sorry, God, in the Biden administration, doing something with technology and something with this automation that we know is coming, because there is a crisis coming. There's going to be lots and lots of people out of work, even perhaps more than there are now through COVID, and I don't think that many people in government understand that. So I'd like to see him serve a little bit.
We could do worse than an Andrew Yang, I think. And
Yeah.
and by the way, let me just self promote here. Tucker Carlson versus Andrew Yang, both of them have been. This could be the Matt Lewis primary.
Yeah.
Both of them have been on this podcast, and we could do. I think that would not be a bad matchup.
It would be a show. It would certainly be a show. I think Tucker would have the advantage there. Just, name recognition is just huge. And Tucker would certainly win on that. Plus he's got a whole network behind him.
So I sensed something earlier. I wanted to circle back when I love this term Latinx, and I sensed a little hostility from you that maybe you don't like using the word Latinx. Maybe
Wait,
you think
you
maybe it
actually
even
like
hurts.
the term? Or you just think it's like funny and ridiculous?
I've been calling it Latinx. I don't know how to pronounce it, but do you believe that this hurt liberals and Democrats, progressives and Democrats, like using terms like this?
I do think it hurts. And there was where is he from? There's a Hispanic congressman, I believe, maybe from Arizona or Texas, who was tweeting about this the other day. Someone said, like, how do we reach the Latinx community? He said, start by not calling us Latinx. I mean, the thing that's so maddening about this term is that when you look at polling of people, who are now called Latinx, 97% of them have never heard the term. The term that most people prefer is Hispanic, which is a term that I've been told for years is offensive, because it presupposes that all of this population descendants from Spain, when lots of them are indigenous, right? So it feels like this is a term that primarily, I'm not totally sure where it originated. It might have originated somewhere, south of the border, but it feels like a term that is primarily used by a hyper-educated white liberal elitist imposing on a population that doesn't want it, right? So there's that, and there's also the fact that it's the problem that it's supposed to solve is is one that affects a very, very small percentage of the population, which is people who identify as non-binary, right? Not even people who identify as trans, because those people typically identify as either male or female. So Latinx is supposed to be inclusive of people who identify as neither. How many people are in that population? I think it's a very, very small population. And so to impose that on an entire population to address the concerns of a very tiny population doesn't make any sense to me. It's sort of like making all bathrooms gender neutral because there's a small percentage of the population that prefers it. And so then now I have to like be in a bathroom with a man taking a shit, right? So we all have to
I don't even want to be in that bathroom.
Right.
Trust me,
Right.
men are disgusting.
Exactly.
Why would you
Exactly.
don't want to go anywhere near that. I could name names.
Right.
There's some famous people that I know that have destroyed bathrooms.
Yes. So it's this top down sort of, we are going to impose this on you despite the fact that you clearly don't want it. I hate it. I hear it like every time, like NPR uses it all the time. And every time I hear it, I just think you do not understand the people who you're talking about.
My satellite, I bought a car and I got satellite radio for a couple months for free, and it finally went out. But I started, NPR had some great election day coverage, which was really cool on election day. But like today I'm trying to listen to it, and like every story is about white supremacy, racism, or an election in the Netherlands or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like
NPR has totally lost the plot. Like yesterday, I was like wearing my old, like I have a shirt from like an NPR station I used to work at called that says like Public Radio Nerd, and I'm wearing this shirt, listening to NPR, just getting more and more infuriated. Thinking like I got to get rid of this shirt. God, why do I contribute to this organization when they are so deeply out of touch? Like yesterday, Trump gives his idiotic press conference. They cut away after about a minute, which is like, if you're a private company, that's your prerogative, cut away. But if NPR is going to air the entirety of Biden's speech and 1 minute of Trump's speech, all that shows is bias. And a lot of people would argue that, well, Trump is lying, he's fomenting hate, he's fomenting fear, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is a public broadcaster on the public airways being funded by taxpayer money. They have an obligation to at least try to appear to be neutral. But what they're doing is they're saying either, we think our listeners are so stupid that they're going to hear Trump talk about voter fraud and then go storm the State House, which I guarantee you NPR listeners are not going to do. Or what they're actually doing is signaling to their donors, signaling to their tribe that they are part of the resistance. NPR should not be part of the resistance. The media should not be part of the resistance. And I feel like I'm the only person here who sees this on my, on my side.
Part of the problem is that it when NPR is part of the resistance, it means people like me can't listen to NPR.
Right.
And if I can't listen to NPR, next thing you know, I'm flipping over and listening to Hugh Hewitt. That leads me into Seb Gorka's show. Next thing you know, I'm a QAnon supporter.
Yes.
And I'm radicalized. So it's got a backlash thing. So
these echo chambers, like we should have figured out in 2016 that these echo chambers and media bubbles are a huge problem. And like my response to that, I realized I'm in an echo chamber. So I just started doing something very simple, which is following conservatives on Twitter. It's very easy to do. Sometimes they annoy me. Sometimes I get mad at what they say. But you need to be aware of what people who don't think like you believe, or you're just blind to how the world works.
That's probably how we got to be besties.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's simple. And I don't think that people in the media see this because they feel like they have an obligation to be part of the resistance. Well, they don't. They have an obligation to reflect the world as it is.
I have a question for you. You may know the answer to this. Something you said earlier has made me think about it. But I saw, Spanish. Spanish has, the word that you would use for like a masculine word is different than a feminine word, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that jibe with how does that jibe with the new political correctness? Like, can you use the masculine or the feminine in Spanish? Is there a debate being had over this?
Right, like they're going to replace all gendered nouns with the word X, which is a letter that exists. Like the way that I don't speak Spanish, but I do know that X in Spanish is X. And so if you're saying Latin X, it's literally a sound that does not exist in the Spanish language. It doesn't make any sense.
Bring in our an expert, but that very well could be true because Dos Equis.
Right.
You're right.
There is no X. There's there's a letter that looks like X, but is not pronounced X. The word Mexico, they don't.
Z thing.
Right. We pronounce like Mexico is not pronounced Mexico. It's pronounced Mexico. Yes. It's.
Would you work if Trump decides to launch a network?
No.
A Trump network. Would you be a correspondent? Would you take your podcast there?
No. No, I would not. I wouldn't take my podcast anywhere. I wouldn't take it to CNN. I wouldn't take it to News Corp. I wouldn't take it to the Trump Network. I like my independence, and I don't want to have a boss ever again. And I do personally have great animus towards Donald Trump. There is, I don't need that much money to be happy. I would not go to his network. And this isn't to say that I'm opposed to speaking. Obviously, I'm not opposed to speaking across the aisle. I think that's very important. But I would not work for Donald Trump.
You know, my wife listens. She supports your podcast.
Oh,
she
thank her for that.
She doesn't listen to my. She'll listen to this one because you're on it, but she doesn't listen to my podcast. She hasn't read my book.
She hasn't read your book?
Has never read my book.
Wow.
In fact, I made a mistake in my book. One of the only I made it. You know, everybody makes mistakes in their books. I made like 2 mistakes in my book. One of them she would have caught had she read it.
Did you dedicate it to her?
No, I dedicated it to my 2 sons.
Well, maybe that was the problem.
I think that was the problem.
Yeah.
I think she's harboring resentment toward me after all these years for not dedicating the book to her.
I mean, I would too.
How about if we dedicate this episode to Aaron?
To Aaron. I agree. I agree with that.
I'll drink to that. Katie, how do people follow you? How do they listen to your podcast?
I'm on Twitter at Kitty Herzog. The podcast Blocked and Reported is on all major podcasting networks. We're on Patreon, blocked at patreon.com/blocked and reported. And yesterday I launched a new project. Did you see this?
No. What is it?
Okay.
What is that?
Okay, so it's a Substack newsletter. I'm doing a 2-month investigation into dog testicles. It is called Moose Nuggets, and it sounds ridiculous, but
Moose is your dog. I know
Moose
that.
is my dog. Moose is my dog. So he's barking right now. I hope people can't hear him in the background. So I am in the process of trying to figure out whether or not I'm going to neuter my dog. And I think it sounds ridiculous, but there are some very sticky and interesting ethical questions here about autonomy and animal rights, and if we should do what's best for the owner or what's best for the animal. And so I'm like going to be talking to animal behaviorists and veterinarians and pet lovers and maybe a pet psychic or something, and try to get to the bottom of like why we do this thing, what it means, and whether or not I should castrate my my dear doggy Moose.
I think it's as a male. I think it's a legitimate question. How do you know what he would want?
I think I do know what he would want, and it's not what it was probably going to happen to him. So that's what it's about.
Yeah. And let me just say, because I know you, I know that this is not only are you an animal lover, not only are you fascinated by dog testicles, the topic, but your dad was a professional in this field, not in the dog testicle field per se, but in the animal field, right?
Yeah, he's the technical term for his field is anthrozoology. So this is the study of human-animal interactions. So he is quite the expert. He wrote a book called "Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat: Why It's So Hard to Think Straight About Animals," which is it's a good, funny book. The parts of it that I read, at least. So I do have an expert to.
Did he dedicate the book to you?
So he dedicated it to my mom, and then my sister saw the galleys and she complained that he only dedicated it to my mom, and he redid the dedication. So yes, he did dedicate it to me, but only under pressure. Exactly. Yeah.
This is Casey Kasem. Dear Casey. That is great. I'm glad that she caught that. She flagged that, which explains why you read it. Now, how can by the way, let me just say, I'm like you, a fan of this new media thing. I'm a podcaster just like you. I have a Substack now. I love it. I think it's a great platform. I heard Twitter might try to purchase them. I hope that doesn't happen.
I hope not. Yeah.
But how do people get your Substack?
It's at moosenuggets.com, or well, actually I have to look it up. It's brand new, so I haven't memorized the URL quite yet. Oh, Moose is barking right now. Okay. It is moosenuggets.substack.com. And you can subscribe there, and it's free.
I love it. And also, just so people know, if they're trying to find you on Twitter, it's Kitty, Kitty.
Yep.
Herzog on Twitter. Katie Herzog, thank you for coming back on the news.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
If you like this podcast, rate and review it on iTunes. Follow Matt on Twitter at Matt K. Lewis. Thank you for listening to Matt Lewis and the News.